The idea of the exhibition initially was, as the title says, it's Haruna Farocki's first time in Warsaw, so people are not don't know his work very well. So I thought it should be a kind of overview over his work. So the first work is from very early times, like from the beginning, from 1969 up to a work we did together last year. So you have a period of almost 50 years. And then the second aspect was that here will be the European Championship in soccer, and so it was the dream to show deep play, Harun's work he made for the last documenter, which is a very, technically speaking, complicated work with 12 screens and many beamers needed, and I'm very happy that we could succeed and have this work. So it's a kind of overview. At the same time, there is, of course, a thematic continuity. It's not just any works, but if you take a close look at the exhibition, you will see some topics emerging again and again in different contexts, and so the works enrich each other.
And it, of course, has also to do with the space, the selection. If we would have many small chambers, we wouldn't take deep play, we would just select other works and so on. That's also always the starting point of the selection. The interesting aspect is that when we see the broadcast on television, we have this one image, and then there are all these other images missing. And there's, for instance, one track showing how much space is not shown. You become aware that there's a huge off space when you are watching a game, which is on television, yeah, not in the stadium. Then you can, of course, scan with your eyes as you like. And off space is an interesting concept. Cinema works with the things it doesn't show, also with the off space, and so from the artistic point of view, it's interesting that you have several screens, then you have this exact measurement of time. The time of the game is proceeding, and you always have the same moment on every track, but you represent it totally differently. So in one case you see such an automatic analysis of the game, how the space is used by the soccer players, how they are, at which speed they are acting, or you see these very old-fashioned things like humans sitting there and counting the actions of the players and registering them. So you see that this huge industry is behind the game or around the game, and that it's such a big production, and that there are not only those images for entertainment, for spectacularity, but also these technical images which have to do something with measurements. The images in the last years have become a tool for measurement in general, and all these images in fusion synoptically can be watched by spectators.
And I guess the interesting thing is also that it's a kind of state-of-the-art of technology, because all the different tools were not made for the work, but they do exist, and so it's also kind of you can see what you can analyze with which means in the year of the production. So
yeah, so we had to adapt them, but they all existed, and there's one interesting thing. Andrea Mines, who made her dissertation with a representation of this game, and that is simply, it has nothing to do with soccer, it has to do something with artificial intelligence. She wants to translate images into texts. And of course a soccer game offers itself for that, because everything is defined in a soccer game. You know where the action is, every little spot which moves represents a player or a referee, and there's this ball, and that's all to it. And then you can select a certain given set of options, and they represent a certain meaning, like A passing the ball to B, or B trying to defend against C, and all these things can be read out of out of the image of the soccer game. So that was also state of the art in those days. Things have evolved since. Today you would find totally different means, and yeah, there's a huge amount of new technology around now.
You could make a remake.
Yeah. When Antje and I worked on this exhibition, Cinema Like Never Before, in 2006 in Vienna and a year later in Berlin, we had also the idea, we wanted to show what the new technology can do with film, how there's a different approach to cinematography if you show it in art spaces. And one aspect is, of course, that you can deconstruct or analyze shot counter shot by using 2 screens, 2 monitors also. Because then you become really aware, as if you would sit at a flat bed in an editing suite, you really become aware how this is constructed, that there's one aspect of space and the next one, and you separate them strictly with these 2 monitors. A very simple process or idea. And in this special case, I liked so much that in Tolerance, there's something like a little regression, that they have already the shot counter shot, and no longer this autonomous long scene where one space, like in theater, is always separated by a cut from the next one. And suddenly they have this door between the 2 characters again, and shot counter shot is based on space A, space B, and as if to explain again what shot counter shot is, because in the beginning of film history probably people were not so sure if the audience would understand already, and they perhaps as if to reintroduce the basic idea, and it offers itself to analysis. The editor was this Polish name, Przygoda, who worked for Wim Wenders a lot and for others in Germany. When I talked to him, he said, I'm not doing montage, I'm an editor, meaning I'm just helping to edit pre-existing but not yet revealed or elaborated work. So perhaps one could simply say montage is when you are aware of the editing, and editing is when you are not aware of it. So it doesn't mean that it's less skillful. It can be very difficult to emphasize some rhythmical aspects also, and nobody is really aware of what about the intervention by editing it, but it adds to the film a lot. And this is more editing. One said also in the 20s, Americans are editing, the Russians do montage also. So in one case, the author introduces an idea, and otherwise the author is absent or seemingly absent. He doesn't want to be visible and palpable.
Yeah. Maybe one can add that he called it soft montage as opposed to hard montage, because if you have 2 images next to each other, they don't extinguish themselves, each other. Yeah. So if you have one image and you edit, you kind of, it means the next image, forget about the one before. It means always the next, the next, the next. And if you work with 2 images, it's a soft montage in the way of this image is still valid, although I add a new one to it.
Right. Yeah, one could call it co-presence. Yes. And it has to do with, in general, there are ideas that the structure of our grammar, so Nietzsche, for instance, he didn't like that this cause-effect logic was so much at rule in the syntax of our language. And Deleuze, when he saw Godard's work, he said that this at, the Latin at, so also the and is so important, not A or B, but A and B. And this could be a first step to a different concept of cinematographic language. Not to say I have to make a new image, and there are enough images and you just have to place them into a different context or to emphasize some aspects of them or give them a different reading or offer them to a different reading. Manipulation always sounds so intentional, but already these laws of condensation, which are at rule so much in cinema, this idea of never a dull moment and so on, that I think that every child is astonished that when the holidays begin, life is not like a movie, nothing happens and so on. Yeah. So I think this aspect of condensation is already very strong, but that is the case with every kind of representation, also with literature and also with painting and so on. But perhaps one could call it ideological standards which are introduced. Yeah.
I guess that Harun's work avoids the problem a little bit because he avoids some strategies other documentarists use, like he never stages something. It's always like something that already happens is being observed. So it's not like a documentarist who's asked a protagonist, sit down here and now tell me about this or that. No, it's always something that is observed, and then it's a clear deal. So it's not about manipulation, it's more like the camera shouldn't be present, the team should be as less present as it is possible, and oftentimes it is possible, because if people are in very difficult meetings discussing things, they really forget about the camera and Harun. So I guess, would you agree?
Yeah, so all interesting and difficult. So yesterday, when we saw this film about Portugal, or the film about the film in Portugal, so already that the camera was always looking for the speakers and not surveying what the people in the audience were thinking or how they were reacting. That creates already a setting in which they will also perform according to these expectations. So there are many aspects to it. Yeah.
I think that the subjects are not equal. There are some of them in the subjects in wardrobes, some of them kind of were starting points when we watched several hundred war films, and we watched them without knowing what we are looking for. So it was during the process of watching these films that we were astonished about some topics that occur again and again, almost in every war film. For example, you have the moment where the protagonists kind of are shocked and silenced, can no longer act. They have these faces, frozen faces. This is kind of epiphany of how ugly war theater is. So we started to collect these little things, like actors who stop acting and are overwhelmed by what's happening in the war. And then there's the aspect of warfare technique, like the communication, which is interesting. You have a megaphone, or you have these funny phones at the front. How do you call them? Where they, I don't know how to.
Yeah, field phones.
Yeah, field phones. And so you have all kinds of communication, also codes and decoding. You have this like secret language. So this was obviously another topic we were interested in.
Yeah, so every genre has many subgenres, and they all have certain rules you can already expect from certain dramaturgic moments what will happen. That's a little bit like with codified music or so in classical ages. You can already expect the next note, or you can guess should it be A or B. And what we also have in linguistics, not only when we hear a syllable we already expect another one, or we say it's not the other one which will be the next now, so in opposition to something imagined. And these kind of structure we try to elaborate.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome. Very welcome.